My name's Bradshaw, and I'm here because I believe everybody in the ops team should do some coding. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'm talking, when I say the ops team, I'm meaning your SysAdmins, your virtual stack administrators, your vSphere administrators, IT practitioners. If you come today expecting a DevOps talk, sorry, I'm not going to mention the Phoenix project again. I'm talking about coding, but not writing a full-blown application. We're not writing the next Microsoft Word, the next vSphere, but equally, I'm not talking about just using the command line when there's a perfectly good GUI to do the job. I'm going to focus on vSphere today. We're at VMworld, but the principles do apply elsewhere. You can use them in file migrations, in Windows management, and so on. So why should you code? Well, first up, automation. If you can reduce the number of times you have to go next, finish. The number of times you do that and you've made a mistake because you forgot to put an IP address in or you chose the wrong setting. Good code is also, good code that is, can be self-documenting. You can read it back and you can understand what that bit of code does. And that means you can share it with a colleague. You can give it to one of your peers to review and go, yes, that looks right, we'll now run that in production. You can repeat it because you've got this written down, it's going to run exactly the same the next time. So you can run at something in your test environment that's done in code, and then you can go to your production environment and hopefully it will run exactly the same. No one's going to accidentally miss a button when they do it the second time. So how do you get started? Well, first off, don't worry about the language. There's lots of programming languages out there, lots of coding languages. There's Pythons, PowerShells, Perls. There's even some that don't begin with P. Don't worry about that. Start off by understanding the fundamentals and breaking down the process that you want to do. If you think about platformer, Super Mario World, in the first bit of the first level of the first world of the first game, you learn how to run, jump, head bump, and squash the baddies. Okay? Once you've learnt those 4 fundamentals, you can go on and do the second level, the third level. You could do the whole game. You could go out and play another Mario game. You could go out and play another platformer. With just those 4 things, you can get a long way into any of them. And coding's the same. We have fundamentals there. So we have instructions. Power on that VM. Disable that network connection. Tell me how big that disk is. And these instructions all use objects. Now, this is going to upset the proper programmers here, but by an object, I just mean it could be a word, it could be a string of text or a number, but it could equally be your VM, or it could be your set of VMs, your entire data center. Things might be a better word. And these get passed between the instructions and used by the instructions. We have decisions. If this is true, then do that, otherwise do that. Quite straightforward. And we have loops. Repeat this until you've done it 10 times, and so on. So we've got those fundamentals, and we need to understand the process. What do we want our code to do? And the best way of doing this is to break it down into small, easy to code steps. Whilst you're doing this, think about how you do it using the vSphere web client. And what's that client doing behind the scenes? We could make a cup of tea. It's not a coding example. Hopefully it helps make sense. So we're making a cup of tea. We pour hot water onto a tea bag, we stir it, we add the milk, job done. But we can break that down into smaller steps. So we want to pour hot water onto our tea bag. Well, first we've got to get that hot water. And we can break that down further. So to get the hot water, we have to empty our kettle. Twining's website says You make sure you use fresh water every time you make a cup of tea. So we need to empty the kettle. But we only need to empty it if it's got stuff in it. So is the kettle empty? We've got to have a look. If it's not empty, let's pour the contents of that down the sink. Then we'll put the water in, turn it on, and so on. These are those fundamentals. The kettle is an object. If the kettle is empty, leave it. If it's not empty, then do something. That's one of these decisions. We've got lots of instructions, like put fresh water into the kettle. And we've got loops. Watch the kettle until it's finished boiling. So we can take that and we can go and do that in our virtual environment. So I've got an example here about upgrading the hardware on multiple VMs that are tagged with a tag I've made up called upgrade me. I wouldn't recommend this is definitely the best way of doing this, but it's a good way of showing how that process can be broken down. So first up, we want to collect all our VMs together. We have a set of all our VMs. And then for each VM in that set, we want to say, is that VM tagged with upgrade me? And if so, let's upgrade the hardware. How do we upgrade the hardware? Well, there's a VMware knowledge base article on this. It doesn't tell us how the code should go, but it tells us the process of upgrading the hardware. We power the VM off. Best practice is to snapshot the VM. We then upgrade the hardware, and then we power the VM back on. So we've just taken that process from the knowledge base article and put that into our list. And we can break some of those steps down a bit more. So when we power off the VM, if you think about when you're sat there in front of the web client, you send that power off command, and then you wait for it to be powered off. You don't just carry on with the next step. And same powering it on. We send the power on, and we wait for it to finish. A good way of checking that is, has VM's tools finished loading? Because to do that, you've got to load the operating system first. That's got to be up and running. Again, we've got those fundamentals in here. The VM and the set of VMs, they're objects. We're doing a decision. If this is the case, if this tag is there, then let's upgrade it. We're looping around every VM in that set. And we're sending a power off command. So that's one of our instructions. So let's do this in some code. Now I said the language doesn't matter, but I'm going to give an example here using PowerShell and the VMware PowerCLI module. Why? Well, PowerShell is quite easy to read. It's basically English. It's made up of these instructions called commandlets, which are verb-noun. So get-process is the one in the screenshot here. You could do get VM or get help if you're stuck. As I say, VMware provides this PowerCLI module that sits in to PowerShell and gives that vSphere integration. So we want to add some code. This is our process from the previous slide. First up, collect all the VMs. Well, there's a command called get VM. And we're going to put that into an object called all my VMs. Now, PowerShell uses a $sign to indicate that as an object. There's lots of punctuation in every coding language. It's all a little bit different. Don't worry too much about it. You'll pick it up. And we're going to loop through our set of VMs. Well, for each VM, so that's a new object, in the set of all my VMs. And then we've got some squiggly brackets. Now PowerShell's using them to be a code block. So basically, for each VM in my set of VMs, do everything that's between those two brackets. So next we need to say, is the VM tagged with upgrade me? Well, I'm not sure how to do that, so I went and Googled it. And I found a blog. Turned out to be my blog, but it's not always the case. And this tells me how I can find out all the tags that are assigned to a VM. So I've taken that code. You can just search the internet, find out how someone else has solved the problem, and use that code. So I've taken that code and I put it in and said, get all the tags assigned to this VM that we're looking at. And if that set of tags contains upgrade me, then do the next code block. we want to power off our VM. Stop VM guest. Quite explanatory. We need to wait till it's powered off. Well, again, I went off and looked for someone who'd done this before, and there's a little bit of code here. We wait 5 seconds. Are you powered off yet? No. Okay, wait another 5 seconds. Are you powered off? Are you all right? Yes. Let's carry on then. We take that snapshot. There's a command called new snapshot. Bet you can't guess what that does. And then we upgrade the hardware. Now again, we can just search on here. This quite straightforward commandlet says get this VM and set the version to version 13. We power on the VM, start VM. That's an easy one to remember. And then we want to wait for VM tools to load. Well, it turns out there's a command called wait tools, and that does that. So, as I say, PowerCLI, PowerShell, it's quite straightforward to read back, and you can now look at this code. I say finished code here, but you could look at that, and you could probably, without much knowledge of coding, understand what sort of thing was going on here. Now, the code's not quite finished. It could do with some comments in there to explain what it's doing, what we're going to do. Once we've got some comments in there, we could share it. Now, this code's up on GitHub. You can go and download it. There's a link at the end. We could modify it. We could use a different version if we wanted to, for example. So in summary, talked about coding, why you should do it, saves those mistakes from happening, it saves you time, and both of those are good for your business. How? Think about those fundamentals and breaking down the process. When should you do it? Well, go off in this afternoon and do it. There's a hands-on lab where you can just go over there and learn about PowerCLI. There's some more resources on my blog there. There's a link. Thank you very much.